Millionaire dies in mysterious circumstances, but as the mortician was dressing the body, suddenly realized that his hand had moved. The man thought he was mistaken. He looked at his partner, and then he looked at the family outside. He realized that none of them had noticed the strange scene, so he boldly went forward to confirm. But the dead man's hand moved again. He was thrilled. He's been working in the morgue for 50 years. He'd never seen anything like this before. He was so excited he fainted, and the dead man sat up as if he'd just woken up. The family members outside were dumbfounded by the scene. The mother even fainted from shock. But the man didn't even know what happened, because he was no longer the same man. 2 hours ago, the man was driving home as usual. A crow suddenly hit the windshield. He jerked the steering wheel, and there was an accident, causing his car to fly tens of meters away. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, a middle-aged man who was born on the same day and had the same name as him had an accident at the same time. But the middle-aged man only suffered minor injuries, but the younger man died after failing to be rescued. The sole envoy came to the hospital immediately after learning the news. He checked the dead man's name to make sure it was correct and went into the hospital room. But what he saw was a middle-aged man alive and well. Although he was baffled, but he still choked the old man to death. He thought he could leave work happily, but on his way home, he received a call from the King of Hell. The King of Hell reprimanded him for killing the wrong person, fearing that his salary would be deducted. He hurried back to the hospital to check on him, only to find out that they had the same name and surname. He was careless and made a serious mistake. This made him very upset. If he didn't handle it properly, he might lose his job. So he hurriedly sent the man's spirit back to the hospital. But the man's body had already been cremated. Looking at his family, they were wailing. He shouted angrily where he should go. The spirit messenger witnessed everything from behind. He took pity on the man. At the same time, the man with the same name was being pushed out. So he put the middle-aged man's soul into the young man's body. But they were two completely different people. One was a powerful tycoon. He was cold and harsh to his wife. The other is a middle-aged man with a scruffy appearance. Inside he's a big boy with a good sense of humor. He loves his wife even more. It's difficult to see how the two men will live together in the future. The woman suddenly realized that the man in front of her was not her husband, because her husband never mentioned sex before going to bed. He never said good night to her. The woman was dumbfounded. She thought it was the aftermath of her husband's return from the dead, but she didn't know that the man's body was inhabited by the soul of another person. It turns out the man died yesterday, but the spirit messenger made a mistake. He mistakenly took the soul of a middle-aged man with the same name as the deceased. By the time he realized he'd arrested the wrong person, the body of the middle-aged man had already been cremated by his family. He blamed himself. He had to put the middle-aged man's soul into the young man's body. But when he woke up in a daze, he found himself in a birthday suit. He was surrounded by unfamiliar sights and people. He thought he was dreaming. When he saw himself in the mirror in a different form, then he realized what was going on. His face was full of disbelief. He borrowed a phone from the strange mom and called his wife. He cried and told her what had happened to him, but she didn't believe in the idea of coming back from the dead. She called him a liar and a prankster. Outside, the mother thought her son was crazy. She rushed to the doctor and his family. The doctor said he had suffered severe brain damage and had to be examined on all fronts. But the man's heart was always with his wife, so he broke free and escaped halfway through. He was in a hurry to get back to his former home. He ran into his wife taking out the garbage. The man rushed up to her and told her he was her husband back from the dead, and tells him where they had their first date, and the secrets that belonged only to them. Mylan felt a surge of fear, but no matter what the man said, she was convinced that the man in front of her was a pervert. She shouted angrily that if he didn't leave, she'd call the police. Luckily, his friend came over. The friend dragged the man back to the house by force, but when he was confronted with a strange wife and two children he'd never seen before, the man did not know how to explain to them, so he hurried to the bathroom and kept crying. When he came out of the shower, he saw his beautiful wife in her pajamas. The man didn't know what to do. He hurried back to the bathroom to change into pajamas. Since their relationship has long been broken, recently they have been sleeping in separate beds, so they went to bed without saying much, but the man didn't know this. So the next day at breakfast, he pretended that he had lost his memory. Then he tentatively asked his wife what kind of person he used to be. Then the man learned from his wife. The owner of his body was originally selfish and arrogant. He was the president of a famous bank. Not only was he harsh to his subordinates, but he also treated his wife like a servant. The woman said she wanted a divorce long ago, but for the sake of the children, she could only put the divorce on hold. The man listened and understood the basic situation. Then he went to his family's restaurant. He used to be a chef and ran the restaurant with his wife, Mylan. Although they were not rich, but they lived a happy life. Now the restaurant has closed down. His family couldn't recognize him, and left his wife in debt. Just when he didn't know what to do, the mother of this body suddenly called and asked him to meet her at a cafe. A few moments later, the man arrived at the place as promised. After the meeting, his mom gave him 100 million won, and told him to spend it as he pleased.